Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory, Waldron, and regular guest of the show, Dennis Dow. What's up, fellas?
Hey, what's going on?
Well, the Cavaliers and LeBron James. Oh, wait.
Yeah, no LeBron in Cleveland. We'll definitely be talking about that today. Like Kory mentioned, that's going to be a preview that we start with. But before we get started, as always, check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio. And before we look forward to next season without LeBron, we'll look back at last year. Obviously, Cavaliers made the playoffs, made it all the way to the finals. They had a really interesting season, though. They made all these additions in the offseason, Dwayne Wade, Isaiah Thomas, Jae Crowder. Those guys were traded at the deadline, brought in some young pieces. But what were your thoughts on the Cavs of last season?
Well, I think it was one of those years. It seems like the last 2 years, it became this kind of hot take, if you will, to suggest they weren't going to make the finals. And last season seemed to be the first time that it was actually true. It seemed to be true. However, they got into the playoffs. They destroyed Toronto, and they managed to get by Boston. And everybody suggested it was their worst team since the 07 Cavs to get to the finals. And I think they did a lot with a little. I don't think their roster was particularly great. And I think that now with, LeBron gone, I'm going to throw it out there that their finals, streak is definitely in jeopardy.
Oh, no way. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, last season was definitely interesting. Losing Kyrie Irving, bringing in the team that probably would have been really good in 2010 with Dwayne Wade and, Kyle Korver a little bit up there in age, trying Isaiah Thomas, Jae Crowder, and then the complete roster overhaul halfway through the season where he got rid of pretty much everybody who started the year on the team. And then he brought in George Hill. Who else did they bring in? Oh, Jordan Clarkson, Larry Nance Jr. Yeah. And just, it shows how good LeBron James is to have the supporting cast he had last year and the ups and downs that went on. The J.R. Smith completely – he's lost. He's pretty much washed in my opinion. You can put him in the category with Melo, arguably. And the finals moment where he didn't know what the score was, just put a stamp on his career because, for me, I'm always going to envision that moment now. But there were a lot of fun moments. LeBron James, obviously, in his 15th season was tremendous. And the fact of the matter is, we saw him hit a lot of game winners. It's funny how 4 years ago or 5 years ago, a lot of the talk was LeBron can't hit game winners. LeBron doesn't have the clutch gene. And I saw LeBron James hit, 5 or 6 daggers last year, one of them being on the Pacers in the playoffs. But it was a rough year for Cleveland because I feel like everyone kind of saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah, pretty much what you guys said. Like Dennis said, this roster wasn't super talented. The fact LeBron got them, where he did in the postseason all the way to the finals, scraped by the Pacers. They beat down the Raptors, but that's kind of a mental game. And then just squeezing past Boston, who was playing really well in the playoffs. Impressive season. I think a couple things that stick out. January, 6 and 8, that was probably the roughest month. And that's where everyone was like, all right, things need to change. Trades need to happen. And they finished the season 29th in defensive rating. Very rare you see a team playing that bad at defense make it all the way to the finals. Then you look at the changes, like you mentioned, Kory, and it's easy to forget they had Derrick Rose on this roster, and that that didn't work out at all. Just a lot of trades, and then it looked like the young guys would come in and give them a boost, and they did for a little bit, and then that kind of faded away, especially in the postseason where LeBron really couldn't count on anybody. But what was the highlight of last season?
For me, I think last season, just looking at it more big picture than necessarily anything they particularly did in terms of a game or a winning streak. I think just not doing anything that was going to completely gut their team. There were so many opportunities last year where they could have traded the draft pick, traded that draft pick to try and get more help for the roster. They could have traded Kevin Love to possibly get more help for the roster. There was a lot of talk about, some of the guys they could have chased. And I think Cleveland did the smart thing by just, they refused to cave in to LeBron in that sense because he wouldn't commit to the franchise beyond, last season. And so I think moving forward, I think they're in a much better place than they were the first time he left because, they had nobody on that team after he left the first time that was as close to as good as Kevin Love. So I think for them, I think keeping their assets that they had in terms of that draft pick, Kevin Love, I think that was the highlight for me, is that they have set themselves up in a better situation than it possibly could have been had they really gone for it all last season.
That's an interesting highlight. I like that. The highlight for me is LeBron James. I enjoy watching LeBron James. I actually, the other day, I was thinking about how funny it is that in like 2013, like I absolutely despised him and like did not like him at all. And now I've gone like completely full circle, and I feel like I am like a LeBron stan at times. And then last year, I mean, I've never seen anyone at his age, 33, or he's 33, I believe, or he was 32. 32, 33, somewhere in that range. Yeah, year 15, and seeing just, playing all 82 games, and then the run he went on in the playoffs. Like, I've just never seen anything like that. And I feel like because I'm just becoming more and more aware, like when Kobe was nearing the end of his career, I didn't, and Kobe was my favorite player. I didn't really realize like the journey and like his ride and run would end. Like I don't know, I guess I was just too young
in the moment. Yeah.
Right. And watching LeBron James, especially like now, I feel like I'm more appreciative of what he's done for the game, how great he's been for so long. And now I just feel like every time he's on, I'm watching him, I get to appreciate how he plays. He's actually probably my favorite player to watch now, which isn't, I mean, that's not a hot take at all, or whatever it is. That's just LeBron James being LeBron James. But he's just incredible. And anyone growing up or anyone listening who like doesn't want to watch the, LeBron James or doesn't like the fact he's on the Lakers, like you need to understand that this is like a once in a generation type player. Like these guys don't come along often. There's a reason why there's only so few compared to Jordan. And there's a reason why LeBron James is one of the only names that's ever compared to Jordan.
For sure. Dennis, I also loved your point. I thought that's, the front office was very disciplined. There was probably a ton of trades on their table where they could have traded that first round pick that ended up being Collin Sexton, who we'll talk about in a little bit, but they didn't. So I thought that was really smart. But like Kory said, I think for me, just a playoff streak. LeBron averaged 34, 9, and 9 on 50% from the field in the playoffs, like Kory said, at age 33, and carried that team. And, the team had a lot of issues. There wasn't really one guy he can consistently count on. Kevin Love was there for stretches, but he also faded away. And then the point guard and the guard play. And then Kory mentioned J.R. Smith not playing great. There was just a ton of issues in the fact he was able to carry this team to the finals. Very impressive. And they probably would have stole game one if it wasn't probably for the biggest disappointment of last season, in my opinion. But what was your biggest disappointment last year, Dennis?
Just in terms of last season, I would say I don't want to say that, they didn't get anything for the Kyrie Irving trade just because, they have Sexton, as we mentioned. But just getting absolutely nothing from Isaiah Thomas. It seemed like, whatever you feel about Isaiah Thomas and his style of play, but trading for him, I think it was, I think they had to do it because there's a lot of talk about Kyrie was unhappy and wouldn't have played or would have got surgery or tried to force his way out. But they seemed to rush Thomas back.
Agreed.
And it just seemed like he never, they rushed him back and he never really got comfortable. And then they traded again, they ended up flipping him. And in return, I think they got Larry Nance and Jordan Clarkson. And so I think just on the whole, looking at that move, it seemed like they could have done better with him, maybe letting him take his time a little more coming back, or I mean, it's hard to think what they could have done differently with that move. I also think some of the roster moves they made last season, at the time signing Dwayne Wade and Derrick Rose, which I know there were people on Twitter where you find all kinds of great opinions, where people, were really saying how, oh my gosh, like this Cleveland team is so stacked. And I think that's the disappointment, is just that although I do commend Cleveland's front office for not panicking and trading away some of those assets, I think the roster they assembled before the season was not. They made some really not great signings, not great moves, and in a way they kind of wasted. They kind of wasted LeBron's last season on some level. Although they, hey, they still got to the finals. It would have been really difficult for them no matter who they signed to beat Golden State. So, but having said that, I would just say getting nothing from Isaiah Thomas.
I think, oh man, it's tough. There's a lot of things that were disappointing about this. I mean, I'm just gonna make it really broad. The disappointment for me is pretty much every single player, not LeBron James. I mean, honestly, J.R. Smith took a major step back. Tristan Thompson played himself off the floor to start the year, and like you mentioned, I mean, Wade wasn't bad for what Wade is at this point of his career. Like, he had a couple nice moments, but it looked like he was miserable his entire time in Cleveland. And obviously, I think there were some issues of him already in the locker room and like not practicing or starting to happen. And then, like you said, Dennis, I mean, Isaiah Thomas definitely felt like he was rushed back. And I mean, he was horrendous everywhere he was last year. Jae Crowder looked like all he was a system player for Boston. Looked like he lost a step. And then you look at other guys, when they got in Jordan Clarkson and Larry Nance Jr. I mean, Larry Nance Jr. had some nice moments, but he really couldn't stay on the floor. Jordan Clarkson had that one game in Boston, like the day after the trade, and everyone was, laughing and jumping as they steamrolled the Boston. And it looked like this trade was going to work out. And then, obviously it went south fast. And George Hill was an every other game player, it felt like, in the playoffs. He had 20 points in game one and then 4 points in game two, which as a Pacers fan, I know all about that because George Hill is rapidly inconsistent. And you never know offensively what he's going to give you. And then, of course, Kevin Love just really couldn't stay healthy, which seems to be the constant trend in his career. So for me, it's just the entire supporting cast of LeBron James last year in Cleveland.
Yeah, both those are really good picks. Like Dennis said, the roster they assembled wasn't great. And then Isaiah Thomas being a disappointment. He just didn't look healthy. And then getting all those guys who couldn't shoot. And then, like Kory mentioned, a lot of guys underperform, especially in the postseason. But for me, it's just going to be that J.R. Smith moment when he, forgot to score the clock or whatever in game one. And that pretty much lost them the series completely. I mean, none of us picked them to win it, but if they'd won that game, things could have changed. LeBron probably wouldn't have broke his hand. They could have maybe pushed a series 5 or 6 or something. Could have helped them in terms of trying to keep LeBron.
Yeah, and just to hop on that real quick, I would say as well, just the fact that they got rid of Jae Crowder so willingly, and then he turned into a huge part of the Jazz, of their playoff run. He was getting serious minutes for them, and he was a big part of that rotation. And, it's just strange. Like Kory said, I think he, in his time in Cleveland, it seemed to hurt maybe his reputation as a player. But after his time with the Jazz, he looks like a solid NBA player.
Yeah, it was incredible because, like you said, in the Jazz, he was helping them in the playoffs, and it looked like the Cavs could have used a player like that.
Yeah, totally.
Moving on from there, looking at this year's ranking, the Cavs are coming in at number 23. Do you guys agree with this ranking? Is it too high, too low? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're 23rd overall, and I think 10th in the East. So for me, that seems about right. I think that Cleveland and Charlotte, it's hard to know what to make of those two teams. I don't know which team is better. There's a chance both teams could be not great at all. But I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland had a shot at the 8th seed, just based on the fact that the East is not great. and it's really hard to know what they're going to get out of Kevin Love. I know he's been kind of maligned, but I would look at it more as I think with LeBron leaving, I think he's going to have a lot more opportunities with the ball. I think his usage rate's going to go up. He's going to have more opportunities to score and be a playmaker for the Cavs. So I think the rating is fair, although for me, I think you could swap them and the Hornets. And I don't think you would be way off. I do think there is some separation between, the 7 and 8 teams that we have in the East, the Pistons and the Heat, versus the Hornets and the Cavs. I think there is some separation between those two groups, but I think Cleveland is at a good spot at 23. I think it's a fair ranking.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Dennis. I think 23 is fair. Obviously, anytime you lose LeBron James, you're going to drop 20 spots. But I mean, realistically, like you said, Kevin Love has been, a vocal point of an offense in the past. They do have some players like George Hill, whatever is left of J.R. Smith. So, I mean, we're really going to see what Tyronn Lue can do next season. But this is definitely a team that in the Eastern Conference, they could be battling for a 7th seed or an 8th seed. I do worry because I know I've made a hot take before that I think Kevin Love's contract is going to be one of the worst contracts in NBA history because I think he's going to be hurt for majority of it, which is just my opinion that I can't back up. But he's just always banged up. And I worry that if a guy like Kevin Love goes down, I mean, the offense of this Cavaliers team is going to look to me, just very, very poor. But we got to see how it turns out. I think this team is pretty much going to stay between, it's 23, right? So I think they're going to stay between the 25. They might even get as high as like 17 if they really, fire on all cylinders and Kevin Love plays like, Minnesota Kevin Love. But I think, the bottom 10 is where they're going to stay most of this year.
Yeah, I think this is pretty fair. I could even see a case made for them maybe being even a couple spots lower because I'm just like Kory mentioned, Kevin Love only played 60 games. It feels like he's always banged up. And then last year they had a lot of problems playmaking when LeBron wasn't on the floor. And obviously now they don't have LeBron. And like I mentioned earlier, 29th in defensive rating, no real rim protector on this roster. Defensively, they're going to have plenty of issues. If Love were to go down, I think they'd be in real trouble. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they competed for the 8th seed, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they were one of the worst teams in the East just because of the issues with the roster. And there isn't a ton of young talent where you're like, wow, they're going to really make a jump this year. A lot of guys, we already know what they're at. Maybe, Collin Sexton, Cedi Osman can make some jumps, but other than that, I don't see a ton of young pieces where I'm like, wow, they're going to really develop and get better this year. Talking about that, this year's additions, draft pick, Collin Sexton, 8th overall, high intensity, known to be a good defender, needs to develop as a scorer, a passer, and a shooter. What are your thoughts on selecting Sexton, number 8 overall?
Yeah, I think it was a good pick in terms of I think it filled the need for them. I think they needed a point guard for the future. I think George Hill, while his deal is guaranteed this season, next season they can easily get out of the contract. So he becomes a trade chip for them. So I think Sexton's good. He's got a long wingspan. He's a great athlete. He's not, a great shooter. Has some tools to be good defensively. So I like the pick. I think the pick ended up being 8th overall. So I like who they got for the pick. I think it was a safe pick as well, just based on what they needed. So I actually like the pick a lot. I think Koby Altman did a good job with selecting Sexton.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already picturing Collin Sexton flexing from that summer league game. I like you mentioned, Nick, when you introduced the guy. I mean, he is high energy. He plays hard. He played at Alabama, right?
Yeah,
I
Alabama.
believe. Yeah. I didn't watch actually almost any of him play in college. Not gonna lie, I watched a couple games in summer league. I mean, it's a good pick. I mean, obviously, as Dennis mentioned, them not trading away this pick and keeping it was a smart move. As we know, LeBron is gone, and George Hill has shown that. Who knows? Maybe another team will be calling and they'll be interested in George Hill's services at some point this season. You give the keys of this offense to Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson. I don't think that's going to happen, but I certainly like what they did with this pick, because this is a guy who, I mean, realistically, he's got good length, he's got pretty good wingspan, and he really could be, a cornerstone going forward.
Do you guys think that he's the future point guard for the Cleveland Cavaliers? Like, he's going to be that guy that's the starter moving forward, or too early to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they really have a choice. I like I said, I think I wouldn't be shocked if George Hill starts the season as the starter, but I would think that Sexton, will eventually come in and get a lot of minutes. I think as well, another interesting wrinkle that Lou could use is that, Hill and Sexton are both long, and, Hill's a pretty good defender. So it could be a situation where he plays both of them at the same time, depending on the matchup.
I don't know. I don't know where I stand on Sexton yet. I really need to see him on the court before I can say that he is the guy going forward. I think George Hill is, at least for the season start. But I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this team starts going downhill. If Kevin Love misses time, maybe they do like a 2-guard. George Hill at the 2, which is where he probably should play anyway. He's more of a shooting guard. And Sexton plays the 1, but I don't know if I'm ready to say that this is for sure his spot going forward.
Yeah, it's going to be something to keep an eye on. I like that combination that Dennis mentioned as well, and you did too, Kory, playing both of those guys together. Are you concerned at all with, Sexton's shot, his, I would guess say reckless mentality, when driving sometimes, taking bad shots and whatnot? Is that a concern, or do you think he'll kind of outgrow that?
I think, I think he'll have, during the regular season, I think not being able to shoot doesn't hurt guys as much as it does, when the postseason comes. However, just based on his athleticism, I think there's something to be said for the fact that, it's going to be hard for people to stay in front of him. So if they give him a cushion, I think that could entice him to drive to the basket. And, he does have a reputation as being a little bit of a hothead. So I'm not sure how that affects him in terms of maybe taking what the defense gives him. The other interesting wrinkle to it is that depending on what Ty Lue wants to do with his offense, if they run some of those things that Kevin Love was amazing in Minnesota, that was a lot of Kevin Love in the high post, kind of being a playmaker, and that would involve Sexton being more of a floor spacer, not so much with the ball at the top of the key. So I'm not sure how Cleveland can reconcile that. It just depends on what Ty Lue wants to do offensively. But I think Sexton is going to have a chance to really figure out what he's good at quickly. I think he will have his opportunity to shoot wide open 3-pointers. And it's just a matter of if he can improve. I think a lot of guys come into the league and improve. And I think he was maybe 33% from 3 at Alabama last season. I had the number in front of me, but I've misplaced it now. But I don't think he's not a terrible shooter, but I think it's a situation where a lot of guys come into the league, and now that they're doing basketball full time, they can actually improve their shot.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about Dennis and people struggling when they come into the league initially with their jump shot. I mean, I'm always mildly concerned when somebody has a poor jump shot, because you just never know if they're going to get their mechanics right. I mean, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is a guy who's never had a jump shot, and it seems like his jump shot gets uglier and uglier over the years. So whenever somebody shoots a low percentage, they seem to struggle. It's always a concern, especially from the point guard position, and especially in this day of age, realistically. I mean, you need guys who can do a little bit of everything. 33% isn't horrendous. It's obviously below average. But like Dennis mentioned, he's gonna be playing with guys like Kevin Love and George Hill, who should be able to help open and space the floor for him, so he gets more wide open looks. He's very quick, though. I I do think off the dribble, he's going to be able to get to the hoop pretty easily. But for the jump shot, it just takes time. Obviously, they got plenty of shooting coaches out there in the NBA, and if Sexton wants to be, a guy who a knockdown shooting point guard, you got to put the work in.
For sure. Great points, guys. Moving on from there, looking at who they acquired in trade, they got Sam Dekker, obviously like a 3-4 tweener. Has showed a little bit in the NBA. Last year, he didn't really play much with the Clippers, more so the year before with Houston. What are your thoughts on the Cavs taking a flyer on Dekker?
Before I do, I just looked it up. 33% from 3 for Sexton. So, sorry. Okay. Sam Dekker. I actually like Dekker. Unfortunately, if you look at what he did last year, you probably won't like him. He had a really tough year last season. He didn't get a lot of minutes with Doc Rivers. He was terrible from 3. Just had a really bad season. However, that first Houston team with Harden, that was kind of they ended up with the 3rd seed in the West in 2016-17. Dekker was a big rotation piece for them. He had a good shooting season from 3 that season, and actually shot 40% from the corner. But again, last season was really tough. So I think he's a guy who can definitely help them. I think he's got a serviceable shot. He can space the floor. I think he's a decent athlete, and I think he plays hard. So I think he's absolutely a rotation player for them, and he fills a need for them on the wing. They don't have too many wings. So I like the move, and I like Dekker moving forward.
Yeah, to me, Dekker is a low risk, high reward. You take the flyer, you see what happens. I don't have a ton of thoughts on Dekker, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's more of a wait and see kind of thing. I know
Yeah.
Clipper fans weren't too happy with him last season. They thought he could crack the rotation. He was kind of outplayed by some G League guys, some call-ups and two-way players. So this is a good opportunity for Dekker, and for the Cavs, it's like, if he works out, he works out. If not, we'll get rid of him because I think his deal is expiring. Now,
the one thing I do – the one thing I want to say, the one thing I do like about Dekker is the fact that he if you watch him play, he often cuts to the basket, and he's always moving, it feels like. And I like guys who are constantly moving on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, doing the small things always pays off. Looking at free agent additions, Channing Frye is back in Cleveland, a veteran, great locker room presence. Don't know how much he's going to provide on the court, but what are your thoughts on bringing back Frye?
Yeah, like you said, I think he's just a great locker room guy. I think he is offensively, I think he fits well next to Kevin Love. Defensively, not so much. But I think he provides someone who is ideal for maybe a point guard like Sexton, because he's not going to clog up the lane. He's gonna hang out around the 3-point line. So I like the move for him. He's definitely winding down. He's at the end of his career. So a good veteran guy to bring in.
Yeah, welcome back to Cleveland, Channing Frye. He's a good locker room guy. He can stretch the floor a little bit. I like it. To me, this is a move that you can't lose on, because even if he doesn't really play, he's going to give you a ton of veteran leadership.
Yeah, and it's a 1-year deal. It's expiring, nothing too big about it, and he's going to kind of help steady things, especially after you lose a leader like LeBron James. And he's a great podcaster. He'll probably go back to doing his podcast. Obviously, RJ isn't there anymore, but we'll see what happens. David Nwaba has committed to sign to the Cavs. No contract has been signed yet, so no deals, no details on that. What are your thoughts on bringing the high-energy Nwaba, the hustling type player, to Cleveland?
I think they need guys. They need more to the roster. And Nwaba is not, he's still a young guy in the league. So I think it's a situation where why not bring him in? Why not bring in these guys and see what you have? Nwaba, he's 25. He is still kind of finding his way in the league. So, why not take a chance and see what you've got?
I love Nwaba, from his Laker days. This kid to me is, I mean, the offensive game has to come along, but I mean, defensively, this kid's a stud. He's crazy athletic. And actually, his offensive game kind of it increased. They got a little bit better last year in Chicago, so you like to see that. He's going to get some playing time, especially if J.R. Smith is like really bad. Like Nwaba could honestly take his minutes, and I wouldn't complain about that at all. So this, to me, this is a good signing if he indeed does sign. We know that some guys have been pulling out of offers, or commitments. So who knows? But I think this is a good signing if it goes through.
Yeah, it makes sense for where the Cavs are at. They need some energy, and he's going to bring some on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, the skill set still needs to develop, but why not for the Cavs? They also signed Isaiah Taylor, a small contract. He also played for the Hawks last year, more of a flyer and a young guy. The big news was extending Kevin Love on that 4-year, $120 million extension. What were your thoughts on the Kevin Love extension? Was it the right move to do that, or would it have made more sense to trade him, or did you sign this extension to trade him later? What are you thinking, Dennis?
It was shocking to me. I was shocked that they did that. Like Kory said, I think there's some worry that it could become one of the worst contracts in the league. Considering that in 2022-23, Kevin Love is going to make $28 million. But I think it's a move that they did just to, keep at least one guy that they know has superstar potential. Because that's the thing is, we don't really know what Kevin Love is going to be this season. We don't know what he's going to do, what he's capable of. And so in that sense, I think it was the right move. But it could be a situation where that contract ends up looking really bad. However, I guess my thinking of the contract was more, well, okay, let's say they don't do it. What are they going to do with that money? Is there another free agent that they're going to spend that money on? Is there another person that's going to come to Cleveland and re-sign that extension? So in that case, I think it's just a situation where I didn't understand it at first, but when you think about it, it seems to make sense with what Cleveland's trying to do by locking up a guy that they feel is still in the prime of his career.
I mean, I understand, like you just said, Dennis. I mean, I understand it from the Cavs' point of view. I mean, you just lost LeBron James. Kevin Love is in the prime of his career. This is a guy who can help sell seats because, I mean, God knows in Cleveland they need some kind of. I mean, the Indians are pretty good, and there's hopes for the Browns after Hard Knocks. But this Cavaliers team has kind of been, the better Cleveland team for for most of this decade, even though LeBron left for 4 years. So Kevin Love helps kind of retain that. It keeps the team competitive. I think it's too much money. And as I mentioned to Nick on one of the NBA outlets when we talked about the signing when it actually happened, that I think only a year and a half of this 4-year deal, he's actually going to be a good version of Kevin Love. As we mentioned previously, he played 60 games this past year. He's had a dislocated shoulder. It's not even like he gets hurt. It just feels like he's always in the wrong spot. I mean, dislocated, against the Pacers in that round one. I think he tore a ligament in his thumb because the ball hit his thumb in a weird angle. Boston, they dislocated his shoulder. He just seems to be on a couple concussions. He's just on the wrong end of a lot of things, and that concerns me. And then if there's ever some more serious injuries, then that's when I'd be really concerned. But I think if you're at Cleveland, you had to keep him. This is an all-star, and who knows? Maybe somebody does see Kevin Love in Cleveland and goes, something, I want to play with him. And in Sexton, and I don't think that's really going to happen, but it's at least an option for them on the table.
Yeah, I think what Dennis was mentioning before is the fact the franchise didn't want to go completely down, and keeping Kevin Love kind of keeps them somewhat relevant, even though the contract could, end up kind of bottoming out. What type of numbers are you guys expecting from Kevin Love next season?
I would say, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for him to up his scoring a little bit. He's never averaged 20 a game during his time in Cleveland. So I'm thinking somewhere 20, 22, 23 a game and probably 10 rebounds a game, 20 and 10. I think he can continue to be efficient from three. However, I think his number of threes goes down. So I would say, shooting 38% from three. He took 5.6 threes per game last season. So I would look for maybe that number to probably stay around the same. I think he'll still get some opportunities to shoot threes. But the minutes to me seem, he only averaged 28 minutes per game last season. I would say that probably goes up. I'm thinking to probably the 32, 33 minutes per game range. So I would say he's going to have a double season, 20 and 10 per game.
Ooh, more time to get hurt. I'm going to say
You're terrible.
I know. 20. I'm going to say all right. Because I don't know if Kevin Love can be the number one option on the offense anymore. I just don't know if you can go back to being that kind of guy. I'm going to say 22.5 points per game. And I'll say he averages, 11.4 or 11.3 in rebounds per game. I'm not worried about Kevin Love rebounding. It seems to be something that he's good at it. The way he positions his body, I got no issues with him in the rebounding part of the game.
Yeah, Kevin Love's definitely going to be a guy to keep an eye on. I think the 2010 numbers are definitely in the realm of possibility, and he'll probably get there. I think I'm most concerned to see where the shooting numbers are at, efficiency-wise, and then where's the assists and the turnovers. Can he get back to kind of creating for others a little bit? We saw a bit of that in Minnesota, but we'll see what happens with Cleveland. Before we get to departures, what do you guys think is going to happen with Rodney Hood? Is he going to sign a long-term deal? Is he going to take the qualifying offer? Is another team going to try to swoop in? Obviously, there isn't much cap space out there right now. What do you think is going to happen with Rodney Hood?
Oh, man, I have no idea. I think Rodney Hood is definitely an NBA player. So I'm sure that there will be a team to scoop him up. I guess it really just depends on what it is that he and his representation want. So, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up signing for, a minimum contract for one season. However, it's hard to put a price on how much you would pay him. If you're a team like Cleveland, I think Rodney Hood's a player that they can use. However, if you sign David Nwaba, that fills those two play the same position, if you will. So I'm not sure. I don't think Rodney Hood comes back to Cleveland. I don't think that the organization as a whole maybe has a good taste in their mouth from their experience with him. Although he did end up coming back to play more playoff games after he refused to come in during that game in the playoffs. It's really hard to say. I could see him signing somewhere else for a minimum contract, but I don't think he re-signs in Cleveland.
It's actually it's ridiculous to think that Rodney Hood is, it's near September 1st here and he still hasn't been signed by anybody. Because I guess the playoff run and everything else left a real sour taste in people's mouth. But I don't know. Unlike that, I think he does stay in Cleveland. I don't know. I don't know what the deal is going to be. I have no clue what his worth is or his value, because he's gotten literally no interest or attention from anybody, or at least I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I think he's going to stay in Cleveland. At this point, there's not really many teams with cap space. I wouldn't be surprised if he just took the qualifying offer and then kind of just played 1 year for lesser amount of money and then went into free agency, kind of cleaning up his reputation a little bit this year, and a lot more cap space is going to be out there. So I think he stays in Cleveland. I don't know when it's going to happen, but at this point, there's not really many options for him. Looking at departures, nothing on the trade front, but free agent losses is obviously the biggest player almost any team could lose in the NBA. They lost LeBron James. How'd you feel when the Cavs lost LeBron?
So it seems like just with everything that happened in the lead up to his free agency, it just seemed like there was no way he was going to stay. I know there are people who say, yeah, it wasn't as cut and dry as maybe it seemed to be. However, it just last season, I just don't think there was ever a moment last season where I thought, yeah, he's going to stay in Cleveland. I think the problems they have with the roster, um, the fact that the team just, there was a lot of talk that without him, this team was not a playoff team. I think that they had to expect that he wasn't going to re-sign. I think they had to have known deep down that, like, yeah, this is it. Like, he's not going to come back. So I would like to believe that the team was, ready for that and prepared for it. So because I just think that, again, like last season, it just seemed the whole season that it was like, yeah, this is it. This is my last season here, and I'm leaving, and not necessarily that everybody knew he was going to the Lakers, even though that was a big storyline all season, was that, yes, he's going to LA. He's going to, go to LA because his family wants to be there. But I think, as I said before, I think they did a good job in just realizing that, yeah, he's probably going to leave. So we're not going to go crazy trying to, make all these moves to make this team better. We're going to focus on the future as well.
Yeah, I almost agree with. I pretty much agree with everything you said. It was spot on. For me, like I was just, I don't know. I wasn't hurt this time. Like when he left Cleveland the first time, like I felt like he betrayed the Cavaliers. His hometown. I don't know. I mean, the decision was just like really poor. Like that was like. Whoever suggested that or helped give him, I mean, obviously it was for a good cause. They donated a ton of money to charity, which kind of goes like under the radar, but it was just like so poor of a decision. It for him, it made sense. I mean, he gave Cleveland everything. He came back, he gave them the title that they didn't have, and he didn't owe them anything. I mean, he said he was going to come back and bring them a title, and he brought them a title. So for that standpoint, he did everything he promised. And then for him, I mean, if you look at this roster, you saw last season ended. I mean, what would make the, greatest player of this generation want to stay on that roster? I mean, there was nothing. So for me, it just made sense. I'm not mad about this decision. This was, for me, the right decision for LeBron. Even if, the Lakers and Los Angeles, I feel like is more of an off the court adventure for him going forward.
Yeah, you guys were pretty on point on this one. Going back to this team, there wasn't really many ways for them to get better. They could have possibly traded the pick, but how much better could they have gotten? There's a lot of holes in this roster. It's not like you add one piece and you're going to beat Golden State. Like Kory mentioned, the Lakers probably aren't going to be Golden State either, but they do have a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of young talent on that team, so they can get better, and especially moving forward. And they provide, the off-court stuff that, will help LeBron as he transitions out of the NBA eventually at some point. So, it's disappointing for Cavs fans, but I think general NBA fans saw it from the start. This roster just really isn't good. They struggled to just get to the finals. And then what happened in game one at the end, I think, there was no chance he was coming back after that. But other than LeBron, they lost Jeff Green, Jose Calderon, Kendrick Perkins, Ocario White, London Parantes, who was a two-way contract. What are your thoughts on losing these guys? Anybody that they're really going to miss or they should have re-signed?
It's so funny that you said they lost Kendrick Perkins.
I was thinking to say, I was going to say that was my guy. Oh, man.
Oh, my gosh.
Someone's got to fight.
Yeah. I don't think they miss any of those guys. I think Calderon had some nice minutes for them last season. Jeff Green obviously had some moments as well. But no, I don't think they miss any of those guys. And honestly, I think there's a couple of guys under contract that I think they're ready to get rid of as well. When you think about, J.R. Smith and, Tristan Thompson. But, it's an interesting roster. I think that some of these guys, when they're next to LeBron, they look like really good players for your team and in your rotation. But when you take him away and there's not really that player that can make them better, I think their warts really show. So it'll be interesting to see who Cleveland decides to keep, who they try to get rid of. In terms of contracts, they're not that bad off. They have some tough salaries. However, next season there's three deals that aren't guaranteed that they can get out of, and so those guys. I think moving forward, I think it's good that they were able to get rid of some of those guys and bring in some younger guys. Jeff Green and Calderon are both older veteran players, so I think it's good to bring in younger guys and just try to develop some young talent.
Yeah, they're not going to miss any of these guys because of where they are currently, in their post-LeBron era. And, Jeff Green was good for them. Kendrick Perkins was always ready in his suit to try and fight somebody. They're not going to miss these guys. As Dennis said, he was pretty much spot on.
Yeah, in the direction the Cavs team is going, bringing back these guys really didn't make much sense. Getting on to the prediction portion of the show, starting five on opening night for the Cavs.
This one was a little tricky. I just went kind of like, I'll just say it. So I'm thinking Tristan Thompson at center, Kevin Love at the 4, Kyle Korver slides in, J.R. Smith, and George Hill. So I think, as I mentioned, I think Sexton doesn't start immediately. Although, I think it's easy to see where they could go ahead and go with Sexton. And also they might, continue to bring Korver off the bench, but that's just my thinking. Those 5 seem to make sense. Those are 5 guys that were heavily involved last season. So yeah, I just slide Korver into LeBron's spot.
Yeah, some mighty big shoes to fill by Korver. So I'm pretty much the same exact lineup. I think George Hill starts, J.R. Smith, Kevin Love, and Tristan. For the small forward position, obviously, I think if Rodney Hood does stay in Cleveland, he's probably the starting small forward. If not, I'm thinking Cedi Osman.
Yeah.
Give the young guy a chance.
A lot of hype around him.
Yeah, and obviously he was just working out with Kawhi, Durant, and LeBron. Like, the fact that he got an invite to that, scrimmage, to me is that's incredible. He's always working hard. So, and it feels right. He was LeBron's protege all last season. He should be the one to try and fill that void that he's not going to be able to fill.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar to you guys. I think, Thompson and Love and probably Hill are the guys you can lock in for opening night. J.R. Smith at the 2 makes sense, but like Kory mentioned earlier in the show, he didn't look great last year. There are some young guys that could possibly push him, especially if he's not playing any defense and his shot still is broken. And at 3 position, I could see them going with Cedi Osman, or I wouldn't be surprised if Rodney Hood possibly got in there. I think they probably don't start Korver because last year, Ty Lue mentioned how I have to watch Korver's minutes, all this, unless he's the type of starter where he just starts him for a little bit of the game and brings him back a lot later. I think they're going to really watch Korver's minutes, or I wouldn't be surprised if Korver's traded. He was mentioned a couple rumors earlier this year.
Yeah, definitely.
Position battle-wise, where do you think there's going to be some battles for a starting spot, rotation minutes? What are you guys thinking?
I think point guard. I think it's just George Hill and Sexton. I think, George Hill, pretty much an expiring contract. He's $19 million this season, and next season his money is not guaranteed. So it's easy for a team to get out of that contract. So it just depends on what Cleveland wants to do. And I think Sexton is a guy that it just depends on if Cleveland, feels that they can compete for a playoff spot and they can be, an 8th seed in the East. I think they might go with George Hill at the beginning of the season. And if things go badly, I think you could easily see Sexton jump into that starting role and play a ton of minutes. So I would say point guard.
I'm going to agree with you on point guard. I definitely think, George Hill could get moved. I wouldn't be totally surprised. But I think if Sexton plays really well off the bench, which it feels like it's been the case for a lot of rookies we've talked about, then, starting off the bench and then possibly earning a starting spot. I feel like Sexton's no different, especially depending on, like you said, how this team's direction goes. So for me, it's the point guard. And I wouldn't be, and I'll add one more. Shooting guard, because even if they bring back Rodney Hood, arguably Rodney Hood could play the 2 and Cedi could play the 3 if they wanted to, kick J.R. Smith back to the bench. But for me, it's point guard.
Yeah, I think point guard, shooting guard, and small forward, you could see possible changes. I mean, there's going to be minutes to go around. None of those guys are, clear cut better than the others. And there is some guys who could make a jump this year. I wouldn't be surprised. But like you guys said, Sexton, if he really is going to push for that spot and he's looks like he's the guard of the future, they probably end up starting him. It could be alongside Hill. It could be without Hill. We'll see what happens. But
just to add to that real quick, I would say as well, Larry Nance and Jordan Clarkson, both of them, just in terms of wherever they fit in the rotation. I think Love, Thompson, and Nance is another position battle you could mention just in terms of who plays better together. So just throwing those in there.
Yeah, you could make the argument that, maybe they'll play Nance with Love more. He may not start, but he could have more minutes on the floor. Right. Thompson's had stretches where he hasn't been very good. Breakout starter.
Sorry about that.
No, good.
I think Kevin Love, I think he I know that he had pretty good numbers last season, but I think he's going to be really good. I think he's going to return to form, and I think everybody's going to remember how good of a player he is. So I like Kevin Love in terms of the breakout starter. We'll do bench in a minute. Sorry.
I'm going to go with Cedi Osman because I don't think Kevin Love's going to break out too much. I mean, he's obviously going to play more minutes. He's going to be more of a focal point. But I think, this team is looking for the new number 2 option alongside Kevin Love since the pecking order has now changed. And I think Cedi, like Nick mentioned, he's been getting high praise. Everyone seems to be really high on him coming off this offseason. So I'm kind of expecting a breakout sophomore season, somewhere where he, plays 25 to 32 minutes and he averages, I don't know, somewhere between 15 to 17 points per game.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, Kory. And Dennis, I could definitely see that as well. Kevin Love's going to be asked to be in a bigger role. Can he get back to that level? We'll see what happens. I'm going to cheat a little bit and combine my bench and starter since we're not really sure who's going to start. I think it's going to be Cedi Osman as well as Rodney Hood. I think anytime you lose a player like LeBron James, you need a lot more production at the small forward position, and both these guys can fill in there. And there's going to be minutes, there's going to need points, and I think these guys can both step up and get better. What about bench player for you guys?
Just based on the fact I wasn't sure if he'd be a starter, I said Osman. I think he can shoot from deep. He plays really hard. I felt like he should have had more minutes in the rotation last season. I think he was a guy that Cleveland could have used at times, in the postseason. I like Osman a lot. I think he's not lighting the world on fire with his athleticism, but he's a solid player. He can shoot it from deep. I don't think he does too much to hurt you. He's not a great defender, but he, sticks to the game plan defensively. I think he tries, and I think he's going to have a good season for Cleveland.
My breakout bench player is going to be Collin Sexton. I think Collin Sexton starts off the bench, obviously. I think he'll be playing himself into the starting lineup at some point, which I think what is going to happen, obviously if Rodney Hood gets signed, that changes everything, but I'm going with the hypothetical that he doesn't return to Cleveland. And that would be, Collin Sexton comes off the bench, he starts really well, and then J.R. Smith is probably starting, he's struggling, and then Tyronn Lue decides to move George Hill to the 2, and then Collin Sexton begins to start. So for me, it's Sexton. I think he's going to be the kind of spark plug this Cavaliers bench may not necessarily have had in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Real possibility. Moving on from breakout players, going to season predictions. What's best case scenario for the Cavs next year?
Best case scenario, 8th seed in the playoffs. I think that's their best case. I think it's going to be really hard for them to leapfrog any more of those East teams. I think their best chance is the Heat. I'm not really sure what to expect from the Heat this season. So I would say if everything breaks right for Cleveland, they can get that 8th seed in the playoffs, which I think in the East would be about 40 wins. I think 40 wins will get it done. So that would be my best case for them.
Best case for me as well would be probably a 7 seed at best. I'm not totally sold on Detroit. Who knows what the Heat are going to be? They're trying to trade off a lot of guys. And then the Hornets seem to always be stuck at 10. So for me, I think it's anywhere from 7 to 8, but a low playoff seed is their best.
Yeah, I agree with Dennis. I think 8 seed is best case scenario, maybe 42 wins, 40 to 42. And that's if everything kind of falls right and Kevin Love doesn't get hurt. But worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, it's hard for me to think Cleveland is going to be one of the worst teams in the East. I think there's some teams that are gonna be much worse. However, if things don't go well, I could see Cleveland possibly, realizing that they don't have it this year, maybe going to the tank, and maybe getting 30 wins. Worst case scenario, I really like them in that 30 to 40 win range. But yeah, I would say that would be their worst case scenario.
Yeah, worst case scenario for me would be they have their draft pick this upcoming year, right? Or no?
Yes. Well,
Yes.
it's protected picks 1 through 10. So if they fall,
Yeah.
if it's in the protection, that works a lot better for them. If not, I believe it goes to Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah, next 2 years, if it's in the 11 to 30, it goes to Atlanta.
Okay, so worst case scenario, which is aka the best case scenario, in a lot of ways, is if this team kind of flutters. They don't end up being an 8 seed. They win, I don't know, 27 games to 33 games, probably like 32, and they're 11 seed or a 12 seed in the East, and they keep their pick and they can add another young asset to this team.
Yeah, for me, worst case scenario is at 28 wins. Love's banged up, and like you guys mentioned, they go more so for the draft pick, which really saves them because losing a first-round pick in the situation they're in definitely doesn't help, especially Cleveland not being known to be a big market to attract free agents without LeBron. So I think 28 wins and would actually kind of benefit them in some way. But what's your actual prediction for the Cavs?
Actual prediction, I think they finished 10th in the East. I think they're 37 and 45. I feel like that's possible for them. I think there's going to be a group of those teams together there. I think, although I I did argue with someone on Twitter who thought the Charlotte Hornets are going to win 48 games this year.
Whoa. Good luck, man. You should definitely go bet that.
I can't even say that with a straight face, but I think they compete for that 10th spot. I think they're they end up probably 3 or 4 games out of the 8th seed, but I think 37 wins sounds about right in my estimation.
Yeah, I was going with 36. I think they finished somewhere, like you said, between that 10 and 12 range probably.
Yeah, I'm a little bit lower than you guys. I think 34 wins. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, defense, playmaking, rim protection, all a big concern. And then just losing a player like LeBron, kind of like Dennis mentioned, he made some of these guys look a lot better than they are. There's going to be a few guys that probably look better without LeBron, just having the ball more. But I think there's just a lot of issues. And then the Kevin Love being banged up, even George Hill himself, being banged up a lot. And what are we going to get from Tristan Thompson? Like, what is he going to do? So I think 34 wins, and they're not going to make the playoffs. If you guys had to put a percentage on it, what percentage would you give the Cavs at making the playoffs?
25%.
Wow. Ooh. 25. I'm going to go higher. I'm going to say 35%.
I'm going to go, I just want to be the lowest, so I'll go 24%. So, I'm not very high on the Cavs, obviously, as you could tell. And I think there is some benefit of getting, a top 10 pick and not losing your draft pick, like I mentioned. But moving on to the truth, what emoji represents the Cavs? I know, Dennis, this is your favorite portion of the show.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
We'll come back to you. Kory, what do you got?
I don't know emojis.
I got the frowny face because every single Cavaliers fan is going to be watching this team and sad at the fact they don't have number 23 running up and down the court anymore. So for me, it's going to be the sad face emoji.
Yeah, we're kind of in the same line right here. I got the broken heart emoji. They're going to be heartbroken. You lose a player like LeBron. It really just sucks the next year, and there's no way around it, especially after all the appearances to the finals, making all those deep runs, all those great performances, all those game winners. Now you don't have that. You're going to have a broken heart for the Cavs season. Anything,
Yeah,
Dennis, or we can move on? Maybe you're good.
Move on.
Okay.
Move on. I got nothing.
League pass rating 1 through 10. What are the Cavs rank for you?
A 2. A 2. And that's just because of the potential of looking at Kevin Love and seeing what he is in this offense. I think that Cleveland is going to be not a very fun team to watch.
Yeah, I'm going 2.5. I think there'll be some games I'm going to be interested in when they play the Pacers, just to see how Chetty and those kind of and Sexton, those young guys are doing. But like you said, watching Cleveland is going to probably be as interesting as going to Cleveland.
Oh, wow, Kory throwing shade. They do have some interesting things in Cleveland. I don't think it's that bad.
I know.
But
all right. Well, that's what the rumors are. Okay, the nightlife in Cleveland. Sorry.
Okay, that's more reasonable because I'd say during the day they have some interesting.
They got the
stuff
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? And they got Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay.
So, but I would go with a 3, and I thought you guys are definitely going to be higher than me. But I think there's not a ton to be excited about. Sexton, and then can Love get back to that level? Maybe somebody will really impress us, but I think not going to be very high in the league pass rankings. What TV show would you watch over the Cavs?
A lot of shows. No, not really. I don't know. I would probably, an Office rerun. I'd be up for that over Cleveland. But I'd probably watch Cleveland. I don't know. That's a hard one for me.
For me, I'm going to say Fear the Walking Dead. Not The Walking Dead, the spinoff Fear the Walking Dead.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh, really? Yeah, there's a spinoff. Not great. The acting is poor. Like Fear the acting of that show. They actually funny thing. They took like one of the main characters from the actual Walking Dead, and they moved him on to Fear the Walking Dead because I'm guessing the ratings are bad, so they're trying to pump it up. But it's not great. They seem to kill off main characters that you add, the ones you like are the ones that die, and the ones you don't like don't die. So it's kind of what are we doing here? So I would say Fear the Walking Dead because, there you go.
There you go. It doesn't sound very interesting, so don't tune into that. I'm going to go with Future Man, Future Man, which is a Hulu exclusive. It's a good show to put on before you go to bed, but nothing too crazy. That
doesn't sound interesting at all. Future Man.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest. It's like a knockoff of Futurama.
So it's not animated. It is actual people, but not a great show. But either will the Cavs be. So, any last thoughts on the Cavs before we get out of here, guys?
Not really. I think I think they have a chance to be better than they were the first time after he left. So I think it'll be interesting to see, how they navigate that and whether, the Kevin Love contract extension was a mistake or it's something that is going to keep them quasi-relevant.
I would say hope for Bronny Jr. in the future so LeBron James comes back.
Yeah, that'd be really cool and something that's been written and rumored about a lot. But that wraps it up for the Cavs preview. As always, thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kory. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Check us out on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio.